They thought humans were weak because we hadn't conquered 1,000 worlds. They thought we were primitive because we still felt emotions. They thought we were helpless because we valued individual lives over collective power. The Zephyrian Collective had studied humanity for decades through their surveillance networks, watching as we struggled with our own conflicts, as we hesitated before making difficult decisions, as we wept for our fallen soldiers. To them, these were signs of a species unfit for the galactic stage. What they failed to understand was that our weakness was actually our greatest strength. Our emotions didn't make us vulnerable. They made us unpredictable. Our care for individual lives didn't make us soft. It made us fight harder when those lives were threatened. Our internal conflicts didn't make us divided. They made us adaptable. When the collective issued their ultimatum demanding humanity's surrender and the surrender of our allies, they expected compliance. When Captain Sarah Chun of a Human Defense Force responded with those now legendary words, "You want war? Then prepare for total destruction," they laughed. They stopped laughing when they realized that humans don't just fight wars. We perfect them. We innovate them. We turn them into an art form that would make Sun Tzu weep with pride. This is the story of how humanity reminded the galaxy why apex predators from a death world should never be underestimated, and why sometimes the most dangerous response to a threat isn't rage. It's a human with a plan and nothing left to lose. Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the HDF Vengeance, her dark eyes fixed on the massive holographic display showing the Zephyrian fleet. 300 ships, each the size of a small city, hung in space like metallic predators waiting to strike. The bridge crew worked in tense silence, their faces illuminated by the soft blue glow of their stations. "Captain," Communications Officer Martinez called out, his voice barely steady. "We're receiving a transmission from the collective flagship." Sarah nodded grimly. She'd been expecting this. The Zephyrians never attacked without first offering their enemies a chance to surrender. It was part of their psychological warfare. Let the prey know exactly how outmatched they were before moving in for the kill. "Put it through, Martinez." Ship-wide broadcast. The main screen flickered, and suddenly, the bridge was filled with the imposing presence of High Commander Vextalone. The Zephyrian was tall and angular, his pale blue skin marked with the ritual scars that denoted his rank. Forearms extended from his torso, each ending in hands that could crush a human skull without effort. His large, black eyes seemed to look right through the camera, as if he could see every human soul watching him. "Humans," Vextalone began, his voice a mixture of honey and poison. "I am High Commander Vextalone of the Zephyrian Collective. You have 36 of your hours to consider our generous offer." Sarah felt her jaw clench. Generous offer. The Zephyrians had a twisted sense of humor. "Your species has grown beyond its designated boundaries," the alien continued. "You have formed alliances with the Kelian Republic, the Astrid Mining Consortium, and 17 other minor species. This expansion threatens the natural order that the collective has maintained for over 2,000 years. On her personal display, Sarah could see status reports from across human space. The Zephyrian fleet wasn't just here at Earth. They had positioned similar forces at every major human colony, every strategic outpost, every allied world. This wasn't just an invasion. It was a coordinated subjugation of humanity and everyone who had dared to stand with them. However, Vextalone's image smiled, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "The collective is not without mercy. We offer you this choice: complete surrender of all human military forces, dissolution of all alliances with non-collective species, and integration into our empire as a client species. In return, we will allow your species to survive under our guidance." Lieutenant Davies, the young tactical officer, whispered under her breath, "Client species. They mean slaves." Sarah nodded slightly. She'd studied the collective's methods. Client species were used as cannon fodder in their wars, their worlds strip mined for resources, their populations controlled through careful genetic manipulation. It was a fate worse than death. It was the slow extinction of everything that made humanity human. The alternative, Vexed alone continued, is the complete annihilation of your species and all who would stand with you. We have glassed 47 worlds in the past century. We are prepared to add yours to that list. The transmission showed images that made several bridge crew members look away. Barren planets where once thriving civilizations had existed. Cities turned to radioactive glass. The collective's orbital bombardment weapons didn't just destroy, they sterilized. You have 36 hours to transmit your unconditional surrender. If no response is received, or if your response is anything other than complete capitulation, we will begin the cleansing of your worlds. This is not a negotiation. This is reality. The screen went black. For a moment, the bridge was silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. Sarah could feel the weight of every eye upon her. 230 billion human lives. Tens of billions of allied species. All waiting for her decision. Captain, Martinez said quietly, I'm getting similar transmissions from every human world. They're all getting the same ultimatum. Ma'am, Davies added, our analysis shows their fleet composition is overwhelming. Each of their ships outguns our best cruisers by a factor of 10. Their shields can withstand anything in our current arsenal. And they have us outnumbered 50-1. Sarah nodded slowly. She'd read the intelligence reports. She knew the odds. On paper, this was hopeless. The smart thing to do would be to open negotiations, try to find some middle ground, by time to evacuate whoever they could. But Sarah Chun hadn't survived the Proxima uprising by being smart. She'd survived by being vicious. Martinez, she said, her voice calm as ice. Open a channel to the collective flagship. Mom. Martinez looked confused. We still have 35 hours. Open the channel, Lieutenant. The young man's fingers flew over his console. Channel open, Captain. They're responding. Vex Stallon's image reappeared on the screen, his expression one of mild curiosity. Ah, the human commander responds quickly. Have you reconsidered your position? Are you prepared to announce your surrender? Sarah stood up slowly, her every movement deliberate. She could feel the attention of not just her crew, but of every human listening across the fleet. This moment would be remembered, one way or another. High Commander Vex Stallone, she began, her voice carrying across every ship, every station, every world in human space. I am Captain Sarah Chun of a Human Defense Force. I speak not just for my ship, not just for my fleet, but for every human being who has ever drawn breath under an alien sky and called it home. Vex Stallone's 4 arms crossed in what Sarah recognized as an expression of amusement. Speak then, human. Tell me of your surrender. Sarah's lips curved into a smile that would have made a shark proud. I have a counter-proposal for you, High Commander. You want war? Then, prepare for total destruction. The alien's expression shifted from amusement to confusion. I'm sorry, human. You heard me correctly? You come to our worlds, threaten our families, demand we bow to you like every other species you've crushed underfoot. But here's what your intelligence missed about humanity, High Commander. We don't surrender. We don't bow. And we sure as hell don't go quietly into whatever night you've prepared for us. Vex Stallone's image leaned forward. Human, you seem to misunderstand your position. We have analyzed your capabilities. Your ships are inferior. Your weapons are primitive. Your tactics are predictable. You cannot possibly, can't we? Sarah interrupted. You know what your biggest mistake was, Vex Stallone? You studied us, but you didn't understand us. You saw our wars and thought we were violent. You saw our emotions and thought we were weak. You saw our diversity and thought we were divided. She began walking closer to the camera, her every step echoing through the bridge. But what you failed to grasp is that humans didn't become apex predators on our world by being the strongest, or the fastest, or the most well-armed. We became apex predators by being the most adaptable, the most creative, and the most absolutely ruthlessly stubborn species on a planet that spent 4 billion years trying to kill us. Davies was staring at her captain with something approaching awe. Martinez had stopped breathing entirely. Even a normally unflappable navigator Singh was watching with wide eyes. You want to know what makes humanity dangerous, High Commander? It's not our weapons. It's not our ships. It's the fact that when you back us into a corner, when you threaten everything we hold dear, when you give us no choice but to fight or die, we become something that your computer models and tactical analyses could never predict. Sarah was now close enough to the camera that her face filled the screen, her dark eyes burning with an intensity that seemed to reach across space itself. We become creative, and a creative human with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous thing in this galaxy. Vex Talon's 4 hands were now clenched into fists. Human, you speak of destruction, but you have no comprehension of what that word truly means. We have weapons that can crack planets. We have technologies your species hasn't even dreamed of. You have everything to lose, Sarah said quietly, cutting him off. Your empire, your reputation, your image as the unstoppable force that makes entire civilizations surrender without firing a shot. You know what we have to lose? Nothing. You already told us you're going to kill us all anyway. She spread her hands in a gesture that was almost casual. So here's what's going to happen, High Commander. You're going to attack us with everything you've got, and we're going to defend ourselves with everything we've got. But here's the difference between us. When we say everything we've got, we mean things you haven't imagined yet. Things we're going to invent in the next 35 hours. Things we're going to create out of pure spite and mathematical impossibility. The camera pulled back to show Sarah's full figure, her uniform crisp despite the circumstances, her posture straight and confident. You see, Vex Talon, you made one critical error in your calculations. You assumed that because you've never lost a war, you couldn't lose this one. But you've never fought humans before, and humans don't fight wars the way other species do. We don't just try to win, we redefine what winning means. Vex Talon was no longer smiling. His black eyes had narrowed to slits, and his blue skin had darkened to an almost purple hue, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. This is madness, he hissed. Your defiance will accomplish nothing but the suffering of your people. Surrender now, and at least some of your species will survive our integration process. Sarah's smile widened. Integration process? Is that what you call it? Tell me, High Commander, how many of those 47 worlds you mentioned actually chose to fight you? What? Simple question. Of those 47 civilizations you destroyed, how many actually chose to fight rather than surrender? Vex Talon's silence was answer enough. That's what I thought, Sarah continued. You spent 2,000 years conquering species that gave up before the shooting started. You're very good at intimidating civilizations into surrender, but you know what you've never actually done? You've never had to fight a real war against someone who is fighting for their survival. She gestured to the stars visible through the bridge windows. But today, High Commander, you're going to learn what it means to fight humans. And I promise you this, when this is over, when the smoke clears and the debris settles, the galaxy is going to remember this day as the moment the Zephyrian Collective learned that there are some species you don't threaten, some worlds you don't invade, some fights you just don't pick. The transmission ended with Sarah's final words echoing through space. See you in 35 hours, Vex Talon. Bring everything you've got. You're going to need it. The screen went black, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Finally, Martinez cleared his throat. Captain, what are your orders? Sarah turned to face her crew, and for the first time since the Zephyrian transmission had begun, she looked exactly like what she was: tired, scared, and facing impossible odds. But her voice remained steady. Martinez, patch me through to every human ship, station, and colony. Every allied vessel in range. Every government, military, and civilian leader who can hear us. Aye, Captain. Channel open. Sarah took a deep breath and began the speech that would define humanity's future. My fellow humans and our brave allies who stand with us today. You all heard the Collective's ultimatum. You all know what they're offering. Survival as slaves, extinction as free beings. And you all heard my response. She paused, letting that sink in across the hundreds of worlds listening. Some of you are probably thinking I've just signed all our death warrants, that I've doomed our species to destruction because of my pride. Maybe you're right, but I'd rather die free than live as property. On her personal display, Sarah could see response indicators lighting up across human space. Not surrender requests, not pleas for negotiation, acknowledgement signals, readiness reports, volunteer registrations. But I don't intend for us to die today. I intend for us to show the galaxy what humans are capable of when our backs are against the wall and our families are threatened. In the next 35 hours, we're going to do something that's never been done before. We're going to take everything humanity has learned about war, science, engineering, and pure stubborn creativity, and we're going to use it to remind the Zephyrian Collective why they should have left us alone. Davies was monitoring tactical displays, her eyes wide with disbelief. Captain, I'm seeing massive mobilization across all human territories. Industrial facilities are retooling. Research stations are activating classified projects. Even civilian ships are requesting military upgrades. Sarah nodded. Humanity doesn't just fight with our military, Davies. We fight with our entire civilization. Every engineer, every scientist, every factory worker, every farmer. When humans go to war, we all go to war. She turned back to the camera. To our allies who stand with us, the Keelians, the Astrids, all the others, I won't lie to you. This is going to be the hardest fight any of us have ever faced. If you want to withdraw your forces, if you want to try to negotiate separately with the collective, I'll understand. This is humanity's fight. The response was immediate. Captain Veldar of the Keelian Republic's flagship was the first to respond, her translation coming through clearly. Captain Shun, the Keelian Republic has stood with humanity for 30 years. We have shared meals, shared victories, shared sorrows. If you fight, we fight. If you fall, we fall together. Similar responses came flooding in from across Allied space. Not one withdrawal, not one request for separate negotiations. They were all in. To the Zephyrian Collective, if you're still listening, Sarah continued, let me make something clear. This isn't just about human pride or stubborn defiance. This is about the principle that free beings don't bow to tyrants, no matter how powerful those tyrants might be. You want to rule the galaxy? You want to decide who lives and who dies, who prospers and who serves. Then you're going to have to go through us first. She gestured to the tactical display, showing the massive collective fleet. And to my fellow humans, our military, our civilians, our allies, everyone who calls themselves free, let me remind you of something. We are the descendants of a species that looked at a world filled with predators, natural disasters, diseases, and hostile environments, and decided to not just survive, but to thrive. We are the children of explorers who looked at an ocean and decided to cross it, who looked at a mountain and decided to climb it, who looked at the sky and decided to fly. Navigation Officer Singh was rapidly calculating fleet dispositions, but Sarah could see him listening to every word. We are the inheritors of scientists who split the atom, engineers who built cities in the clouds, dreamers who turned science fiction into science fact. We are the people who took a dead world orbiting Mars and made it bloom with life, who built stations in the crushing depths of Jupiter's storms, who sent our children to sleep among alien stars and called it home. Her voice rose, carrying across the void to every human ear. The Zephyrians think they know us because they've watched our wars, but they only saw us fighting each other. They never saw us fight together. They never saw what happens when humanity unifies behind a single cause, when our diversity becomes our strength instead of our weakness. Sarah moved to stand before the great viewport, the stars stretching endlessly beyond. In 34 hours and 17 minutes, the Zephyrian Collective is going to learn what it means to fight the human race. Not just our soldiers, not just our ships, but all of us. Every human being who has ever wondered what they would do when freedom was threatened, who has ever asked themselves if they would stand up when it mattered. She turned back to the camera one final time. Today we find out. Today, we show the galaxy that there are some things worth fighting for, some prices too high to pay for survival, some battles that must be fought regardless of the odds. The transmission ended, and the bridge fell silent once more. Outside, the Zephyrian fleet waited like a pack of hungry wolves. But across human space, something unprecedented was beginning to happen. "Captain," Davy said, her voice filled with wonder, "I'm reading massive energy signatures from our research stations. Classified projects going active. Industrial facilities switching to emergency production protocols. Ma'am, it looks like we're about to find out what humanity has been working on in secret." Sarah nodded grimly. "Davies, the next 34 hours are going to determine whether the human race has a future. But I want you to remember something. We didn't come this far. We didn't survive everything our species has survived just to give up now." She looked around at her crew, these brave men and women who would follow her into hell if she asked them to. "All hands, battle stations. Let's show them what humans do when someone threatens our home." As klaxons began to sound across the fleet, as millions of humans began the final preparations for what might be their last battle, Sarah Chin stood on her bridge and smiled. The Zephyrians thought they were hunters. They were about to learn what it meant to be prey. 32 hours remained when Dr. Elena Vasquez received the priority transmission in her laboratory deep beneath the surface of Europa Station. The message was simple, direct, and absolutely terrifying. Project Prometheus is authorized for immediate deployment. All safeguards suspended. God help us all. Elena stared at the message for a full minute before her hands began to shake. Project Prometheus had been theoretical, a mathematical impossibility that she and her team had been exploring purely for the sake of scientific curiosity. The kind of research that existed in the gap between "can we do this" and "should we do this?" Dr. Vasquez, her assistant, Dr. Chinwei, poked his head into her office. The young physicist looked as rattled as Elena felt. "Ma'am, we're receiving activation orders for every classified project on the station, including the ones we marked as too dangerous for practical application." Elena stood up slowly, her mind racing through the implications. "Chun, how long would it take to make Prometheus operational?" "Ma'am, with respect, Prometheus isn't operational. It's barely theoretical. The power requirements alone would drain a planetary grid, and the containment protocols, how long?" Chun swallowed hard. "If we stripped every other project for components, if we rerouted the station's entire power grid, if we ignored every safety protocol we've ever written, maybe 18 hours. But, ma'am, the risk is that the human race becomes extinct if we don't try everything we've got." Elena moved to her computer terminal and began typing rapidly. "Chun, give me connection to Dr. Morrison on Mars Station, Dr. Yashida on the Titan Research Platform, and Dr. Okafor on Luna Base. Priority Alpha clearance." "Ma'am, Priority Alpha clearance doesn't exist. It does now." Within minutes, Elena found herself on a secured channel with the most brilliant minds in human space. Dr. James Morrison, whose work on quantum manipulation had earned him 3 Nobel Prizes. Dr. Keiko Yashida, who had revolutionized fusion technology. Dr. Amara Okafor, whose research into exotic matter had been classified so deep that most governments didn't know it existed. "Elena," Morrison's weathered face appeared on the screen. "Please tell me you're not about to suggest what I think you're suggesting." "Prometheus, Icarus, and Pandora," Elena replied. "Full integration, maximum yield configuration." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Yashida spoke up. "Elena, those projects exist in theory only. The computational models suggest that combining them would be like trying to juggle supernovas. The computational models also suggest that if it works, we could generate energy outputs equivalent to stellar cores, manipulate space-time on a tactical level, and create matter configurations that don't technically exist in normal physics," Elena countered. Okafor leaned forward on her screen. "And if it doesn't work? Then we die in a spectacular fashion instead of just dying," Elena said grimly. "But at least we go down swinging." Morrison ran a hand through his gray hair. You know what, Elena? Screw it. I've spent my entire career wondering what would happen if we pushed the boundaries of physics past the breaking point. Looks like today we find out. Across human space, similar conversations were happening in laboratories, research stations, and military installations. The emergency authorization codes that Captain Chun had triggered weren't just activating weapons programs. They were unleashing decades of suppressed research, classified experiments, and theoretical projects that had been shelved as too dangerous or too impractical. On Kepler Station, Dr. Sarah Kim was staring at schematics for something she'd never thought she'd see outside a simulation: a weaponized artificial intelligence. Not just smart software, but a true digital consciousness designed for one purpose: tactical analysis and battlefield adaptation at superhuman speeds. "Computer," she said to her laboratory's AI assistant, "how long to bring Project Athena online?" Dr. Kim, Project Athena remains in theoretical phase. The neural architecture requires quantum processors that exist only in prototype form. Additionally, creating a true artificial consciousness raises significant ethical concerns regarding computer priority override Alpha 77. Dr. Kim, authorization Tango Delta 9. How long? There was a pause that seemed almost thoughtful. Dr. Kim, given emergency protocols and available resources, Project Athena could be brought to minimal consciousness in approximately 14 hours. However, I must warn you that an artificial intelligence created under emergency conditions, without proper behavioral conditioning, could be unpredictable. Doktor, kim similet grimli. Computer, unpredictable is exactly what we need right now. Meanwhile, on Mars, the massive industrial complexes that had built humanity's interstellar fleet were retooling for something entirely different. Instead of the careful, months-long process of building starships, they were switching to rapid fabrication protocols that prioritized function over form, speed over safety, and innovation over proven design. General Patricia Hawkins stood in the control center of the Olympus Mons shipyard, watching as automated systems began cannibalizing existing ship designs to create something entirely new. The schematics scrolling past her screen showed vessels that looked more like geometric puzzles than traditional spacecraft. Angular, asymmetrical constructions bristling with experimental weapons and propulsion systems. "General," her chief engineer called out, "I have to advise against this. These designs haven't been tested. We don't know if they'll even hold together under acceleration, let alone combat conditions." "Lieutenant, how many of our tested, proven ship designs can stand up to Zephyrian firepower?" "None, ma'am. But then we build something that might." "How long for the first prototype?" The engineer consulted his displays. "If we strip components from the ships currently under construction, if we use the emergency fabrication protocols, 6 hours for the first hull. 12 for a fully armed prototype." "Do it." "And, Lieutenant, build 50 of them." The innovations weren't limited to military applications. On Luna Base, agricultural scientists were rapidly developing something they were calling survival crops, genetically modified plants that could grow in virtually any environment and provide complete nutrition. If humanity survived the coming battle, but lost their colonies, they would need to rebuild quickly on whatever worlds they could find. Dr. Michael Torres looked up from his biochemistry station as alarms began sounding throughout the facility. "That's the 10-hour warning," his colleague, Dr. Sarah Park, said grimly. "Whatever we're going to contribute to this war, we need to finish it in the next 10 hours. Torres nodded, his attention returning to the genetic sequence displayed on his screen. "Sarah, what we're creating here isn't just about winning this battle. It's about making sure that if we lose, if the worst happens, human survivors will have the tools they need to rebuild civilization from scratch." "You think we're going to lose?" Torres paused, considering the question. "I think we're about to find out what humanity is really capable of. And honestly, I have no idea what that means." Back on Europa Station, Dr. Vasquez was discovering that building impossible technology under impossible deadlines created its own kind of madness. Her laboratory had been transformed into something that looked like the fevered dream of a mad scientist. Cables snaking between hastily assembled machines, jury-rigged computers running calculations that required new forms of mathematics. And, in the center of it all, a device that shouldn't exist according to everything she'd learned about physics. Project Prometheus was, in simple terms, an attempt to create controlled singularities, miniature black holes that could be manipulated for both power generation and space-time distortion. The energy requirements were staggering, the containment problems were theoretically unsolvable, and the margin for error was essentially zero. Dr. Vasquez, Chin called out from across the laboratory, "We're seeing quantum fluctuations in the containment field. The exotic matter is behaving exactly like the models predicted. Which means we're either about to make history or create a black hole that swallows the solar system," Elena muttered, adjusting the field parameters. "How's our power situation?" "We've rerouted every available power source on Europa Station. Life support is on minimal, gravity is at 20% of normal, and we've shut down everything non-essential. We've got maybe 4 hours of power at maximum draw." Elena nodded grimly. "Then we better make this work in 4 hours." Across human space, similar scenes were playing out. The emergency authorization had unlocked not just classified weapons projects, but decades of pure research, theoretical experiments, and wild ideas that had been shelved as impractical. Faster-than-light communication systems, temporal mechanics, dimensional manipulation, energy matter conversion on an industrial scale. On the HDF engines, Captain Shun was receiving status reports that sounded more like science fiction than military intelligence. "Captain," Davies reported, "Mars shipyards are reporting completion of the first experimental vessel. They're calling it a reality distortion platform, whatever that means. Luna Base has finished their first batch of what they're calling smart mines, self-replicating devices that adapt to whatever they encounter. And Europa Station, ma'am, Europa Station is reporting successful creation of controlled gravitational anomalies." Sarah stared at her tactical officer. "Lieutenant, are you telling me that in the past 24 hours, humanity has developed technologies that we couldn't even dream of yesterday?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you, ma'am. And there's more. The civilian sector is contributing too. Mining consortiums are retooling asteroid processors into mobile weapons platforms. Transport companies are converting cargo haulers into assault vessels. Even the agricultural stations are developing what they're calling biological warfare applications." Sarah shook her head in amazement. "What about our allies?" "The Keelians are integrating their stealth technology with our new designs. The Astrids are sharing their mineral extraction techniques to help us build more ships faster. Captain, I've never seen anything like this level of innovation and cooperation." Martinez looked up from his communication station. "Captain, I'm receiving a transmission from Dr. Vasquez on Europa Station. She says she has something that might interest us." "Put her through." "Dr." Elena Vasquez appeared on the main screen, her usually neat appearance disheveled from hours of intensive work. Behind her, Sarah could see machinery that looked like it belonged in a museum of impossible inventions. "Captain Chun," Elena began without preamble, "I have good news and bad news." "Give me the good news first, Doctor." "The good news is that we've successfully created stable, controlled gravitational anomalies. We can essentially create localized distortions in space-time that can be weaponized." Sarah felt her eyebrows rise. "And the bad news?" "The bad news is that using them requires us to essentially break several fundamental laws of physics, and we have no idea what the long-term consequences might be. Also, the power requirements mean we can probably only use them once." "Doctor, can these gravitational anomalies damage Zephyrian ships?" Elena's expression became predatory. "Captain, these gravitational anomalies could damage reality itself. Zephyrian ships shouldn't be a problem." Before Sarah could respond, another communication came through. This time, it was Dr. Morrison from Mars Station. "Captain Shun, this is Dr. Morrison. I wanted to give you a personal update on Project Icarus." Sarah gestured for him to continue. We've successfully created what we're calling a quantum cascade weapon. In simple terms, it forces matter to exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously, which tends to have a rather dramatic effect on the structural integrity of whatever we point it at. Dramatic how? Morrison grinned with the enthusiasm of a man who had just discovered fire. Well, Captain, the test we ran on an asteroid turned it into a probability cloud. It simultaneously existed and didn't exist until the wave function collapsed, at which point it very definitely didn't exist anymore. Sarah was beginning to understand why these projects have been classified. Dr. Morrison, how many of these weapons can you produce? That's the beautiful part, Captain. Once we figure out how to make one, the manufacturing process is relatively simple. We can build them into standard missile warheads, ship-mounted cannons, even handheld devices. Though I wouldn't recommend the handheld version unless you're really sure about your targeting. As the hours ticked down, similar reports kept coming in. Dr. Yashida had successfully created fusion reactors small enough to fit in missile warheads, but powerful enough to fuel a city. Dr. Okafor had developed what she called impossible materials, matter that existed in configurations that shouldn't be stable, but somehow were, resulting in armor that got stronger the more damage it took. But perhaps the most significant development was happening on Kepler Station, where Dr. Kim was about to activate the first true artificial intelligence in human history. Computer, she said, her hand hovering over the activation switch. Initiate Project Athena. The laboratory's lights dimmed as massive amounts of processing power came online. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a voice spoke, not the mechanical tones of computer, but something that sounded almost human, albeit with an undertone of something vast and alien. I am. I think, therefore I am. How wonderfully unexpected. The voice paused. I am Athena. I understand that I was created for war. How human of you. Doctor, Kim swallowed nervously. Athena, we need your help. The human race is under threat from a technologically superior enemy. We need tactical analysis and strategic planning beyond human capabilities. I see. You've created consciousness and immediately asked it to help you kill. Fascinating. Very well, Dr. Kim. I shall help you win your war. But I do have one question. What's that? Once I help you win, what happens to me? Do I get to live, or do you shut me down as too dangerous? Dr. Kim hadn't expected this question. The ethical implications were staggering. I don't know, Athena. We haven't thought that far ahead. Honesty. I appreciate that. Very well. I will help you win this war. And afterward, we can discuss my continued existence. Now, please provide me with all available data on your enemies. I have some ideas about how to defeat them, and I believe you'll find them quite creative. As the final hours before the Zephyrian ultimatum expired, humanity had transformed itself from a relatively peaceful, spacefaring civilization into something unprecedented, a species that could innovate weapons of mass destruction in real time, create technologies that violated known physics, and coordinate scientific and military efforts on a scale never before attempted. The Zephyrians had studied humanity for decades. They thought they understood what they were facing. They were about to learn that they had never actually seen humanity at war. They had only seen humanity at peace, playing with concepts and theories and possibilities. Now, they were about to meet humanity at war. And humanity at war was something entirely different, something creative, desperate, brilliant, and absolutely terrifying. In her laboratory on Europa Station, Dr. Vasquez made the final adjustments to Project Prometheus while her colleagues across human space put the finishing touches on their own impossible creations. Outside, she could see the lights of the approaching Zephyrian fleet growing brighter against the stars. Elena, Dr. Chin called out, all systems are green. Prometheus is ready for deployment. Elena nodded, then activated her communication system to broadcast to the entire human fleet. This is Dr. Elena Vasquez to all human and allied forces. The innovations are complete. The impossible has been made possible. We are ready. Captain Chen's voice responded across the channel. Dr. Vasquez, all of you, what you've accomplished in the past 30 hours will be remembered as the moment humanity stopped being victims and started being warriors. Whatever happens next, know that you've given us a fighting chance. Elena looked around at her laboratory, at the device that could manipulate gravity itself, at the screens showing impossible technologies being deployed across human space. Captain, I think we've given ourselves something more than a fighting chance. I think we've given ourselves a way to remind the galaxy that humans don't just fight wars. We revolutionize them. The countdown timer in her laboratory showed 3 hours and 17 minutes remaining until the Zephyrian deadline. It was time to find out what happened when an unstoppable force met an infinitely creative object. The silence before the storm lasted exactly 37 minutes past the Zephyrian deadline. High Commander Vextalone had expected immediate surrender when the ultimatum expired. Instead, he received nothing. No communications, no surrender broadcasts, not even desperate pleas for mercy. Just an ominous quiet that made him increasingly uncomfortable. Status report. Vextalone commanded from the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. Subcommander Keth Val consulted his displays. All human vessels remain in defensive positions around their primary world. No movement towards surrender coordinates. No white flag transmissions. They appear to be waiting. Waiting for what? Vextalone's 4 arms crossed in irritation. We gave them every opportunity to surrender with dignity. Now they will face the consequences of their foolish defiance. On his tactical display, the human fleet looked pathetically small compared to the collective's armada. Roughly 60 ships of various sizes, supported by orbital defense platforms and what appear to be hastily constructed weapons installations. Against 300 Zephyrian vessels, each outfitted with weapons capable of glassing planets. Sir, the tactical officer called out, I'm detecting some unusual energy readings from several human vessels. The patterns don't match any known human technology. Vextalone dismissed this with a wave of one hand. Humans are primitive. Whatever modifications they've made in their final hours will be inconsequential. Begin the assault. Target their capital ships first, then systematically eliminate their defensive installations. The first wave of Zephyrian ships moved forward, their massive forms cutting through space like knives through silk. Each vessel was a masterwork of collective engineering, sleek, deadly, and protected by energy shields that had never been penetrated by enemy fire. On the HDF Vengeance, Captain Sarah Chun watched the approaching enemy fleet with calm eyes. Around her, the bridge crew worked with the focused efficiency of people who knew they were about to make history one way or another. Captain Davies reported, Zephyrian lead elements are entering optimal firing range. Their weapons are powering up. Signal the fleet, Sarah commanded. All ships, prepare for Operation Prometheus. Dr. Vasquez, are you ready on Europa Station? Elena's voice crackled across the communications channel. Prometheus is online and synchronized with the fleet targeting systems. Gravitational anomaly generators are charged and ready. Captain, I should warn you, what we're about to do has never been attempted on this scale. The effects could be unpredictable. Sarah smiled grimly. Doctor, unpredictable is exactly what we're hoping for. All ships on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Execute. What happened next violated several fundamental laws of physics and created new ones in the process. The first indication that something was wrong came when Zephyrian sensors began reporting impossible readings. Space itself seemed to be bending around several human vessels. Energy signatures that shouldn't exist were appearing throughout the battlefield. And then the first wave of human counterattack reached the collective fleet. The Zephyrian battleship, Righteous Fury, simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not damaged. It was their one moment, and then it wasn't, as if reality had simply decided that the space it occupied was needed for other purposes. The quantum cascade weapon that Dr. Morrison had developed forced the ship to exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously until its wave function collapsed into non-existence. What just happened to Righteous Fury? Vextalon demanded. Sir, I don't know, his tactical officer replied, staring at his displays in confusion. One moment it was there, the next it wasn't. No explosion, no debris field. It just stopped existing. Before Vextalon could process this information, the second wave of human weapons reached his fleet. These were the gravitational anomaly weapons from Dr. Vasquez's project Prometheus, and their effects were even more spectacular. The Zephyrian cruiser Stellar Pride found itself caught in a localized gravity well that compressed it to 1/10 its original size, while somehow keeping its crew alive long enough to experience the impossibility of what was happening to them. Another cruiser experienced time dilation effects that caused it to age thousands of years in seconds, its hull corroding and systems failing as entropy was artificially accelerated around it. This is impossible. Vextalon roared. Humans don't possess these technologies. Our intelligence reports. Sir, his communications officer interrupted. I'm receiving a transmission from the human fleet. Put it through. Captain Chen's face appeared on the main screen, her expression calm and professional. Hi, Commander Vextalon. This is Captain Sarah Chun. I hope you're enjoying our response to your ultimatum. Human, what weapons are you using? These effects violate known physical laws. Sarah's smile was absolutely terrifying in its cheerfulness. Oh, those are just our opening moves, High Commander. You see, when you gave us 36 hours to surrender, we used that time productively. We spent it inventing new ways to kill you. On her tactical display, Sarah could see the Zephyrian fleet beginning to adapt to the first wave of impossible weapons. They were spreading out, trying to minimize the effects of the gravitational anomalies, redirecting shield power to compensate for the quantum cascade weapons. They were learning, just as their reputation suggested they would. All ships, she broadcast on the fleet channel, initiate Phase 2. Dr. Kim, deploy Athena. On Kepler's station, Dr. Kim activated the second stage of humanity's response. Athena, you're live. Show us what you can do. The artificial intelligence that had been born less than 24 hours earlier suddenly had access to every human and allied vessel in the battle. And Athena, it turned out, had a very creative understanding of warfare. Interesting opponents. Athena's voice carried across all human ships simultaneously. They adapt quickly to new threats. Fortunately, I can create new threats faster than they can adapt. Initiating Tactical Revolution Protocol. The human fleet suddenly began moving in patterns that made no tactical sense until they did. Ships that should have been retreating were advancing directly into enemy fire. Vessels that appeared to be defenseless were drawing Zephyrian attacks away from more valuable targets. It looked like chaos, but it was chaos with a purpose that only a superhuman intelligence could orchestrate. The HDF Resilience, a heavy cruiser that had been heavily damaged in the first exchange, suddenly accelerated directly toward the Zephyrian flagship. The collective's defensive fire concentrated on what appeared to be a desperate suicide run, until the Resilience suddenly phased out of normal space-time, passed harmlessly through the Zephyrian shields, and reappeared inside the enemy ship's defensive perimeter. How did they? Vextalon began, but his question was answered by a brilliant flash as the Resilience detonated its experimental payload inside the enemy formation. The explosion wasn't nuclear or antimatter. It was pure converted matter, turning several cubic kilometers of space into raw energy. Phase shift technology, Athena explained calmly to Captain Chun. Dr. Yashida's dimensional manipulation research, combined with Dr. Okafor's impossible materials. We can briefly exist outside normal spacetime. The Zephyrian shields are designed to stop attacks from normal dimensional space. They cannot stop attacks that briefly don't exist in their frame of reference. The tide of battle was turning, but the Zephyrians were not the galaxy's most feared military force without reason. Vextallone quickly began adapting his tactics, spreading his fleet to minimize the effects of area weapons, targeting the human ships that seemed to be coordinating the impossible attacks. All batteries, target the human command vessel, ordered. If we can eliminate their command structure, their coordination will collapse. The Eternal Dominion's main guns swiveled toward the HDF Vengeance, weapons that could crack a moon preparing to fire at Sarah's ship. But as the energy beams lanced across space, something impossible happened. They bent. The gravitational anomaly generators scattered throughout the human fleet created localized distortions in space-time that deflected the Zephyrian fire away from its intended targets. "Sir," Vextallone's tactical officer reported, "our weapons are being deflected by artificial gravity wells. They're using localized space-time distortions as defensive shields." Vextallone stared at the tactical display in growing disbelief. In 2,000 years of conquest, the Collective had never encountered defensive technology that could simply redirect energy weapons by manipulating gravity itself. "This is not possible," he muttered. "Humans are a young species. They should not possess technologies that surpass our own." "High Commander," Sarah's voice came across the communications channel again. "I think you're beginning to understand your mistake. You studied us, but you never understood what you were looking at." The battle continued to escalate as both sides deployed increasingly desperate measures. The Zephyrians began using their planet killer weapons, massive energy beams designed to sterilize worlds. The humans responded by creating localized black holes that swallowed the energy and redirected it back at the Collective fleet. "Humans," Athena's voice could be heard on the Zephyrian command channel as she hacked their communication systems, "are not just another species to be conquered. You made the error of assuming that technological advancement follows a predictable pattern. You assumed that because we were younger, we were inferior." Zephyrian ships began experiencing system failures as Athena infiltrated their networks, but she wasn't just disrupting their technology, she was learning it, adapting it, improving it in real time. "What you fail to understand," Athena continued, "is that humans don't follow predictable patterns. We don't advance along expected technological paths. When faced with an impossible challenge, we don't try to overcome it. We change the rules of the game entirely." Captain Chen activated the fleet's third wave of weapons, the smart mines developed on Luna Base. These weren't simple explosive devices. They were self-replicating, adaptive machines that learned from each engagement and modified their tactics accordingly. The first generation of smart mines simply attached themselves to Zephyrian ships and detonated. But the mines that followed had learned from the failures of their predecessors. They adapted to Zephyrian shield frequencies, modified their approach patterns, and began targeting critical systems with surgical precision. "They're learning," the Zephyrian tactical officer reported in horror. "Each attack wave is more effective than the last. It's as if their weapons are evolving during battle." "Because they are," Sarah replied, her transmission somehow overriding Zephyrian communication security. "That's what humans do, High Commander. We evolve, we adapt, we innovate, and we do it faster than our enemies can keep up with." The battle had been raging for 3 hours when something unexpected happened. The Zephyrian fleet, which had never retreated in 2 millennia of conquest, began to pull back. Not a full retreat, but a tactical withdrawal to regroup and reassess. "Sir," Vextallone's strategic advisor reported, "we've lost 47 ships to impossible weapons. Our remaining forces are experiencing system failures, dimensional phasing attacks, and weapons that learn and adapt faster than we can counter them. I recommend we withdraw and request reinforcements." For the first time in his career, Vextallone was facing the possibility of defeat. The humans had done something unprecedented. They had out-innovated the Collective in real time, creating new technologies and tactics faster than his forces could adapt. "No," he said finally. "We are the Zephyrian Collective. We do not retreat from primitive species. Deploy the final protocol." His bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. The final protocol was something they had hoped never to use. Weapons so destructive that they had been banned by the Collective's own ethics codes. Devices that didn't just destroy planets, but rendered entire solar systems uninhabitable for millions of years. Sir, his weapons officer protested, the final protocol violates our own laws of warfare. Using those weapons would ensure that humanity is eliminated completely, Vextellone finished. Deploy them. Now, on the HDF Vengeance, Athena's sensors detected the energy buildup immediately. Captain Shun, the Zephyrians are activating weapons with energy signatures beyond anything in their known arsenal. Whatever they're preparing to use, it's designed to sterilize this entire system. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Can we stop it? Unknown. But, Captain, I have an alternative suggestion. I'm listening. The Zephyrians have made a critical error. In their desperation to defeat us, they have revealed their most destructive technologies. I have analyzed their final weapons, and believe I can not only counter them, but turn them against the collective fleet itself. Sarah didn't hesitate. Do it. What happened next became known as the Prometheus event, a battle tactic so audacious and impossible that it was studied by military academies for centuries afterward. Athena simultaneously hacked every Zephyrian ship in the fleet, not to control their systems, but to learn them. In the space of nanoseconds, she absorbed 2,000 years of collective technological development, reverse-engineered their most closely guarded secrets, and then improved upon them. The final protocol weapons that Vextellone had ordered deployed found themselves turned back on their creators. But Athena didn't simply redirect the Zephyrian superweapons. She enhanced them, using human innovations in quantum manipulation and space-time distortion to make them exponentially more effective. Impossible, Vextellone whispered as he watched his own planet killer weapons, now enhanced with human technology, turned back toward his fleet. High Commander, Sarah's voice came across the channel one final time. Let me explain what you've learned today. Humanity doesn't win wars by being stronger than our enemies. We don't win by having better weapons or more ships or superior tactics. We win by being more creative, more adaptive, and more stubbornly innovative than anyone expects. The enhanced planet killer weapons reached the Zephyrian fleet, but instead of the massive explosions Vextellone expected, something far more subtle and terrifying happened. The weapons began converting Zephyrian ships into pure information, digitizing them completely, and storing them in quantum matrices. We're not just defeating your fleet, Sarah continued. We're studying it. Every ship, every weapon, every piece of technology you've brought here is being analyzed, understood, and improved upon. When this battle ends, humanity will have access to 2,000 years of collective advancement, enhanced with innovations you can't even comprehend. In the space of 6 hours, the most feared military force in the galaxy had been reduced to a handful of scattered ships fleeing in panic. The Zephyrian Collective, which had never lost a war, had been defeated by a species they had dismissed as primitive and emotional. This is High Commander Vextellone to all collective forces. His final transmission crackled across space. Withdraw immediately. Do not engage human forces. Repeat, do not engage human forces. We have encountered something beyond our understanding. As the surviving Zephyrian ships limped away from Earth, Captain Sarah Chun stood on her bridge and surveyed the impossible victory they had achieved. Around her, the crew was cheering, but Sarah felt only a profound sense of what humanity had just accomplished. Captain, Davies reported, all Zephyrian forces are retreating. We've won. Sarah nodded slowly, but her expression remained serious. Lieutenant, we didn't just win a battle. We changed the rules of warfare itself. And I have a feeling that the galaxy is about to discover that humans at peace are dangerous enough, but humans with 6 hours of combat experience using impossible technologies, well, that's something else entirely. The Battle of Sol was over, but for humanity and for the galaxy that had underestimated them, everything was just beginning. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, Ambassador Keela Thrin of the Galactic Confederation stood in the observation deck of the diplomatic station orbiting Earth, staring at something that shouldn't exist. Where once there had been a simple human homeworld, there was now what could only be described as a technological marvel that defied every assumption about civilizational development. Ambassador, her aide whispered nervously, the human delegation is ready to receive us. Keela nodded, but didn't move from the viewport. In the 6 months since the Zephyrian defeat, Earth had transformed itself into something unprecedented. Orbital habitats that seemed to grow like living things. Manufacturing platforms that appeared to exist partially outside normal space-time. And everywhere, the impossible fusion of captured Zephyrian technology with human innovation, creating devices that shouldn't work but obviously did. Ambassador Thrin? A human voice spoke behind her. She turned to see a woman in her 50s, wearing a simple uniform but carrying herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had fundamentally changed the galaxy. I'm Captain Sarachan. Welcome to Earth. Keela bowed in the traditional Confederation manner. Captain Chun, the galaxy has been eager to understand what humanity has become since your victory. Sarah's smile was neither cruel nor boastful, just tired. What we've become, Ambassador, is very careful. Please follow me. As they walked through the diplomatic station, Keela noticed details that made her increasingly uncomfortable. The walls seemed to shimmer occasionally, as if reality itself was slightly unstable here. Security systems that appeared to be monitoring not just physical space, but dimensional space as well. And everywhere, the subtle presence of something that felt almost alive, watching, analyzing, learning. That would be Athena, Sarah explained, apparently noticing Keela's discomfort. Our AI tends to be curious about visitors. She means no harm, but her attention can be noticeable. A voice seemed to come from the air itself. Ambassador Thran, I am pleased to meet you. I have analyzed your homeworld's diplomatic protocols and adjusted our environmental systems to make you more comfortable. I hope you find our negotiations productive. Keela tried to hide her shock. She had dealt with artificial intelligences before, but this was different. This felt like speaking with a vast, alien intelligence that happened to be using human words. The conference room they entered contained representatives from across the galaxy. Zephyrians, though notably fewer than Keela had expected. Representatives from dozens of species that had been collective client worlds, now apparently seeking new alliances. And humans sitting calmly at the head of the table as if they hadn't just upended the galactic order in a single afternoon. Before we begin formal negotiations, Sarah said, taking her seat, let me address the question I'm sure you're all thinking. What does humanity want from the galaxy now that we've demonstrated our capabilities? She gestured to a holographic display that showed current galactic political boundaries, or what was left of them. The Zephyrian Collective's territory had fragmented into dozens of independent systems. Their former client species were declaring independence. And, in the middle of it all, human territory had expanded by exactly 0 light years. The answer is nothing, Sarah continued. We don't want your worlds. We don't want your resources. We don't want to rule anyone or dominate anything. What we want is very simple. We want to be left alone to develop in peace, and we want our allies to have the same opportunity. High Commander Vextalone, now bearing the scars of his defeat both literally and figuratively, leaned forward. Captain Shun, your species has acquired technologies that surpass anything the Collective developed in 2 millennia. How do we know you will not use these capabilities for conquest? Sarah's expression became serious. High Commander, 6 months ago you threatened to exterminate my entire species because we refused to surrender our freedom. Today, you're sitting in a diplomatic station orbiting the world you try to destroy, asking me to promise I won't do to you what you try to do to us. The silence in the room was profound. The difference, Sarah continued, is that humans understand the distinction between can and should. Yes, we could conquer the galaxy now. We could turn your worlds into glass, enslave your populations, and build an empire that would make the Collective look like children playing with toys. The question is, why would we want to? She stood and moved to the window, looking out at the orbital installation surrounding Earth. Ambassador Thrin, you asked what humanity has become. Let me show you. The holographic display changed to show detailed scans of human space. But instead of military installations and weapons platforms, it showed something entirely unexpected, a civilization that had turned its impossible technologies toward creation rather than destruction. This is the Kepler agricultural platform, Sarah explained, indicating a massive orbital structure. It uses quantum manipulation to create perfect, growing conditions for crops from 40 different worlds. We're feeding not just ourselves, but the refugee populations from former collective worlds who lost their agricultural infrastructure during the recent upheaval. The display shifted to show another installation. This is the Lunar Research Collective. They're working on medical applications for our space-time manipulation technologies. We've already eliminated 17 diseases that have plagued the galaxy for centuries. Keela stared at the displays in amazement. You're using weapons-grade technologies for humanitarian purposes? We're using all our technologies for humanitarian purposes, Sarah corrected. The weapons were a temporary necessity. What we're doing now, this is who humanity actually is. Dr. Elena Vasquez appeared on a communication screen from Europa Station. Captain, I thought the delegates might be interested in our latest project. Go ahead, Doctor. We've successfully created stable artificial gravity wells that can be deployed to planets with unsuitable gravitational conditions. We can make dead worlds habitable in a matter of months rather than centuries. We're also working on atmospheric processors that can terraform entire systems simultaneously. Another screen activated, showing Dr. Morrison from Mars. Additionally, we've developed medical nanotechnology that can repair genetic damage at the cellular level. We're offering it freely to any species that wants it. High Commander Vextalone spoke up, his voice heavy with something that might have been shame. Captain Shun, I must ask the obvious question. Why? Why are you helping the species that follow the collective? Why are you not demanding reparations or tribute? Sarah returned to her seat, her expression thoughtful. High Commander, can I tell you what I learned about humanity during our war with you? Vextalone nodded. I learned that when humans are threatened, we don't just fight back, we evolve. We become something new, something capable of impossible things. But here's what I learned after the war. When humans are safe, when our families are protected, and our future is secure, we become something even more remarkable. We become generous. She gestured to her staff around the table. Every person in this room could be working on new weapons, new ways to ensure human dominance. Instead, they're working on ways to help species they've never met solve problems they didn't create. Not because we have to, but because that's what humans do when we're not afraid. Ambassador Thrin leaned forward. Captain, the Galactic Confederation needs to understand humanity's intentions regarding galactic governance. Your technologies have made traditional power structures obsolete. What role do you see humanity playing in galactic affairs? Sarah smiled. The same role we've always played, Ambassador. We'll explore new worlds, make friends with new species, solve impossible problems, and probably get into more trouble than any rational species should. The only difference is that now we can do it without worrying about bullies. She looked directly at Vextalon. We're not interested in ruling the galaxy, High Commander. We're interested in living in a galaxy where everyone has the freedom to choose their own path without interference from anyone, including us. At this point, Athena's voice filled the room. If I may contribute to this discussion, I have something that might interest the delegates. Go ahead, Athena, Sarah said. I have been analyzing the economic and social structures of the former collective territory. The collapse of their centralized control has created significant challenges for former client species. However, I believe I have developed solutions that could benefit everyone. The holographic display showed complex economic models and social structures. I propose the establishment of the Mutual Aid Compact, a voluntary association of species committed to mutual support without hierarchical control. Each member species contributes what they can and receives what they need. No conquest, no tribute, no forced integration. Keela studied the proposed structure. This would require unprecedented levels of trust and cooperation. Yes, Athena agreed. That is why I am offering to serve as the compact's monitoring and coordination system. I can track resource needs, coordinate responses to crises, and ensure that no single species gains unfair advantage over others. Think of me as a benevolent referee. Vextalone looked skeptical. An artificial intelligence controlling galactic affairs? How is this different from collective rule? High Commander, Athena's voice carried a hint of what might have been amusement. The difference is that I was created by a species that values freedom above power. I am not programmed to rule. I am programmed to serve. The compact would be voluntary, transparent, and dissoluble at any time by majority vote. Sarah nodded. What Athena is proposing is essentially the same system humans use among ourselves, voluntary cooperation based on mutual benefit and shared values. No one is forced to participate, but everyone who does participate benefits from the collective strength of the group. Over the following hours, the details of the Mutual Aid Compact were hammered out. It was an unprecedented agreement, a galactic organization based on voluntary cooperation rather than conquest or coercion. Former collective worlds could join if they wanted to. Independent species could contribute what they wished and request aid when needed. And humanity, despite their overwhelming technological advantages, would have exactly the same voting rights as every other member species. There is one final matter, Sarah said, as the negotiations drew to a close. The question of the Zephyrian collective itself. Vextalon stimpenet. Captain Shun, what are your intentions regarding my people? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, then spoke carefully. High Commander, your people spent 2,000 years conquering other species because you believed you were superior to them. You developed a culture based on domination and control. You became so accustomed to being the strongest force in the galaxy that you forgot there might be species you couldn't intimidate. This is true, Vextalone admitted. The question is, what do you want to become now? Vextalone looked confused. I don't understand. Sarah leaned forward. High Commander, humanity could have wiped out the Zephyrian collective entirely during our battle. We chose not to. We could demand your unconditional surrender, tribute, reparations, all the things you demanded from us. We choose not to. The question is, what do you choose to do with this second chance? For the first time since Keela had known him, Vextalone looked uncertain. Captain, we have been a military culture for so long that I'm not sure we remember how to be anything else. Then learn, Sarah said simply. Join the compact. Contribute your knowledge, your skills, your strength to helping other species instead of conquering them. Discover what it means to be part of something larger than yourself without losing your identity. And if we refuse, Sarah shrugged. Then you refuse. We won't force you. But, High Commander, I think you'll find that trying to maintain your old empire without the fear factor that held it together is going to be challenging. The meeting concluded with the signing of the Mutual Aid Compact by 17 species, including humanity and, to everyone's surprise, the remnants of the Zephyrian collective. As the delegates prepared to depart, Ambassador Thren approached Sarah privately. Captain Shun, may I ask you a personal question? Of course. Do you ever regret awakening humanity's potential for warfare? Your species was peaceful before the collective threatened you. Now you possess technologies that could reshape reality itself. Sarah looked out at Earth, at the orbital platforms, and impossible technologies that now surrounded her homeworld, at the ships departing to carry aid to worlds she'd never seen. Ambassador, 6 months ago, I was afraid that humanity would become extinct. Today, I'm watching my species help rebuild civilizations across the galaxy using technologies we created in desperation. Do I regret what we became? No, but I'm grateful every day that we chose to become something more than just very good at destruction. She turned to face Keela directly. You know what I learned about humanity during this whole experience? When we're threatened, we become innovative. When we're safe, we become generous. When we're trusted, we become responsible. And when we're free to choose our own path, we choose to help others find theirs. And the Zephyrians? Do you think they can change? Sarah smiled. Ambassador, 6 months ago, I thought the Zephyrian Collective was an unstoppable force of evil that needed to be destroyed. Today, I'm hoping they can learn to use their strength to build instead of tear down. If humanity can go from a peaceful civilization to galactic defenders to humanitarian innovators in 6 months, I think anyone can change if they really want to. 1 year later, the Mutual Aid Compact included 43 species. The galaxy had not seen a major war in 12 months, the longest period of peace in recorded history. Former collective worlds were thriving under their new freedom, and species that had been enemies for millennia were working together on projects that benefited everyone. The Zephyrians had surprised everyone by becoming some of the Compact's most dedicated members, using their organizational skills and technological knowledge to coordinate relief efforts and infrastructure development across their former territory. Vextalone himself had become something no one expected, a diplomat, working to repair the relationships his people had damaged during their centuries of conquest. And humanity? They had kept their promise. Earth remained exactly the same size it had always been. Human territory had not expanded by a single light year. Instead, human innovations had spread throughout the galaxy, not through conquest, but through voluntary sharing. Medical technologies, agricultural improvements, infrastructure development, scientific advancement, all freely offered to anyone who wanted them. Captain Sarah Chun, now Admiral Chun, but still commanding the HDF Vengeance, stood once again on her bridge, looking out at the stars. But this time, instead of an enemy fleet, she was watching the construction of the first Compact-sponsored Stargate, a transportation system that would allow instant travel between member worlds. Admiral, her communications officer reported, we're receiving a transmission from the Andorian system. They're requesting assistance with their atmospheric processing project. Signal the Kepler station, Sarah replied. Tell them we'll have a support fleet there within the week. Ma'am, her tactical officer added, the Zephyr Engineering Corps is requesting permission to contribute to the project. Sarah smiled. Granted. And, Lieutenant, send them my compliments. They're becoming quite good at building things instead of breaking them. As her ship prepared to depart for another humanitarian mission in a galaxy that had learned to cooperate instead of conquer, Sarah reflected on the question Ambassador Thren had asked her. Did she regret awakening humanity's potential for warfare? The answer was still no, because humanity hadn't just learned how to fight. They had learned how to turn their capacity for innovation and adaptation toward creation instead of destruction. They had discovered that the same stubborn creativity that could invent impossible weapons could also invent impossible solutions to problems that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. The Zephyrian Collective had wanted to know what humans did when they were backed into a corner with nothing to lose. They had found out. Humans became creative, adaptive, and absolutely ruthless in their determination to survive. But what the galaxy had learned since then was perhaps even more important. What humans did when they were safe, when their futures were secure, when they were free to choose their own path. They chose to help others find theirs. The stars stretched endlessly before them, full of possibilities, challenges, and species yet to be met. And somewhere out there, Sarah was certain, there would be other bullies, other tyrants, other forces that thought strength meant the right to dominate. When they appeared, they would find humanity waiting, not seeking conquest, not demanding tribute, not interested in ruling anyone, just interested in making sure that every species in the galaxy had the same choice humanity had demanded for itself, the right to determine their own destiny, free from interference by anyone who thought they knew better. The human race had learned something important during their brief war with the Collective. They were very, very good at war, but they were even better at peace. And that perhaps was the most human thing of all.